Welcome to Fertility Friendly Food, the podcast. My name is Stephanie Velakis and I'm an expert certified fertility dietitian and nutritionist and founder of The Dietologist, a multiple award-winning virtual fertility and pregnancy nutrition clinic serving thousands from around the world, and of course, the host of this pod, Fertility Friendly Food. This podcast is dedicated to all things health and nutrition in the world of fertility, reproductive health, and pregnancy. Each week, I bring you practical snack-sized episodes to help improve your lifestyle on your trying to conceive journey, alongside guest expert interviews to help inspire you to learn and grow whilst you grow your family. Welcome back to another episode of Fertility Friendly Food, everyone. This week, I am excited to shed some light on a topic that receives far less attention when it comes to fertility, and that is male factor infertility. Statistics show that up to 30 to 50% of all couples trying to conceive will be impacted by male factor infertility. And whilst infertility isn't talked about enough in wider society in general, you'd probably not be too surprised that most men are not going to the pub or to the golf course to chat about their sperm problems and issues with their friends. So I wanted to take this opportunity to shine a light on all things male factor infertility and get a man's perspective who has lived through this journey. So I've invited Jon Summers, aka Infertility Man on Instagram. He and his beautiful wife, Laura, also have a fabulous YouTube channel, which I have been binge watching ahead of this episode. A great website filled with resources, and they've also released a book, A Man's Guide to Infertility. All those will be linked in the show notes for you below. Jon joins us today to share his story of male factor infertility, his perspectives on this path, and insights to pass on to any of you out there who may be facing a similar journey, and also to even out the conversation and the burden of infertility as well. So let's make Jon welcome. Welcome, Jon. Perhaps we can kick off the pod and have you introduce yourself to our listeners here at Fertility Friendly Food so we can learn a bit more about you for those who don't follow you on Instagram and all your amazing channels.
Geez, how much time have you got? Anyway, it'll be the abridged version. So my name's Jon Summers. I met Laura Cooney, nearly 6 years ago now, but before that I had thought I'd made a nice little story that I couldn't have kids, and that was due to my cancer back in 2011, and I guess some other medical issues that I had growing up through my life. Yeah, meeting Laura was I guess the best thing and potentially the worst thing for her, because she ended up having to do so many retrievals to have our bub. But from my cancer, I met Laura. We sort of ended up delving down the road where she asked me, well, is it really true that you can't have kids? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. I'd sort of made peace with the idea that I wasn't going to have them, so I was just taking everyone else's kids and giving them back. It's fantastic. It's a great deal. So we ended up just starting to, unbeknownst to her actually, I started going into researching procedures and obviously diagnoses of no sperm and all that sort of guff, and I ended up having a fine needle aspiration, and they found one sperm. It wasn't moving, it wasn't doing anything, but for me, I guess it was the start of a very long journey for us. But we were actually quite excited because I'd made up the story that I wasn't having them, and I thought I didn't have any. So we really dug into the trenches. We sort of skipped a few things there, so biopsies and the like were going to leave scar tissue or remnants of issues. Because of my cancer, I had a testicle removed. So really, I'm sort of at a handicap anyway, because I only had one testicle and it was probably malfunctioning as well. But in saying that, the surgery, the microtesi that I had, it had only been around really for about 5 or so years. And we ended up finding a doctor here who worked in with Laura's fertility specialist. And our story's it's different to everyone. Everyone's story is different. So because of the microtesi, it was meant to be a once-only procedure. Laura didn't respond well to the meds, or doesn't respond well to the medications. So we sort of sat around 3 eggs, 2 eggs, 1 egg, and it was pointless for me to do a procedure that we may find sperm, we may not.
Sure.
And if we did, we wanted to make sure we had plenty of eggs. So that's why Laura ended up doing 15 retrievals. And I was lucky enough to actually have a chance to do the micro-tesi procedure once more. So I ended up doing it twice. And literally, I'm out to pasture now. I'm on hormone replacement. I just do my best to help Laura, and that woman is amazing. She just makes me want to be better.
Yeah. I was just saying before we hit record for everyone listening that I did a bit of ahead of this interview. I've been following your Instagram page for years now, and I've always found it so awesome to see a couple, but particularly a male, be really open in talking about male factor fertility issues and talking about the process of IVF with a good degree of knowledge, because sometimes it feels like men are left out of the conversation. They're not invited into the conversation, whether it's male factor fertility or not. And so that's what really attracted me to ask you to the podcast today. So if we just go back in time a little bit, you were originally diagnosed with testicular cancer, which is the second most common cancer in young men aged 20 to 39.
Oh, young man, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah. You are a young man in the eyes of diseases like cancer, right? And so when did you find out that you had testicular cancer? How did you find out? Because this is a cancer that's touched my life personally as well. I've had friends be diagnosed with testicular cancer, and something I see somewhat frequently as a fertility dietitian. So we'd just love to chat briefly about that.
It is quite funny. Now, they say hindsight is 20/20, and when I was diagnosed in 2011, I was actually on a holiday. And I was just uncomfortable in the nether regions. And I just noticed that one of my testes was really hard, and it was actually bigger than normal, and it was really tender. So in good old male fashion, I put it off for a good 6 months.
Wow, this sounds familiar.
Until the pain relievers just didn't do the business. And I finally got down to my GP. I didn't really have a GP because I just didn't get crook. Ended up seeing my GP, and he just goes, he has a bit of a feeling. He goes, it's probably just epididymitis, which is just inflammation of the tubules in the testes. And I went, well, great. He goes, why don't you go down and have a scan? So I went down, had an ultrasound. And when I was in the ultrasound, I actually knew the people down there from the ambulance where I work. So I'd been there for patients and stuff. Oh, John, what are you doing here? And I said, I've got a scan. And he looks, and he actually puts me on the bed, and he does the scan, and then he goes, so do you want to wait for the letter, or do you want me to show you? And anyway, he ended up showing me on the screen, and he said, you'll understand this. And he showed me, and he basically saw my whole testy was a tumour. He said, I'd probably go back and see a doctor. And it was only through my medical knowledge that I was able to just sort of decipher, all right, we need to get into this. So got back to my doctor. That was basically Tuesday through to the following Monday. So the Tuesday I saw my GP. I had the scan that afternoon. Wednesday I was back in seeing the GP again. The GP goes, right, I'll get you off to see a specialist. So I go and see the urologist. The urologist had me in for a scan and bloods, and he goes, what are you doing Monday? And I went, I'm not doing anything Monday. And I was literally under the knife Monday. So it all happened very quickly, which was probably quite a blessing, because I really didn't have a chance to digest. I'm like, right, cancer, sore nether regions, let's see if we can fix this. And
straight to action mode.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Get it done. And I was even had these fantasies of the fact I was just 2 days I was going to be back in the gym. And it was, but I don't know. Don't even ask me how
the invincibility of youth, as we say.
How I even had that idea, because I tell you what, it was That was really sorted me out, that surgery. And it was lucky because my mate actually sent me a message just after that. I'm very glad he didn't send me before it, because it was actually a picture of someone doing a microtesi where they actually, an orchidectomy, where they actually had it laid out on the hip. And I'm like, I'm very glad he did not send that to me prior to the procedure.
Oh my God, actually so accurate. Was there an opportunity at that point in time to freeze your sperm, or was that not done in 2011, or it just wasn't done at that time? Or
I think back to all that happened, and it actually wasn't even a consideration. I think potentially the partner I was with, maybe it just wasn't a stage in, like, being 34. I guess I'm not the only man to think that I was invincible, like you just said, though, and my time will come. 34, something like, yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, my specialist never mentioned it. I never mentioned it, which was kind of a shame, but potentially at that time as well, the procedure that I ended up having all these years later wasn't actually around then. It was in its infancy type thing. So you can see the progress in technology when it comes to helping out finding sperm and obviously extracting eggs and finding good quality. Anyway,
yeah.
you go on and on and on. But it's funny that you look back now that I see that occurrence of cancer, and then I go back through. I was a weighty kid. Like, I was just go back to a hernia, so undescended testes as a baby, and that was the one that turned into a tumor. And you're like, all these sorts of little things all the way along. I dealt with gynecomastia too. So from like early teens through to like 17, 18, ended up having operations for it. So my hormones must have been quite all over the place all the way through. Since that undescended testy, it probably never recovered. It might have been strangled. And then the other one tried to pick up its workload, and then potentially it was overworked. So we've just ended up with this stressed reproductive area for an extended period of time. And then obviously then the tumor finally showed itself, and it was dealt with very quickly. I was very lucky. I was blessed in having an amazing oncologist who very progressive, and he just said, John, you're young, you're fit. He said, I can't find it. There was a spot in my lung which they actually kept an eye on from the scans for the next 5 or so years, but it never became anything, so it might have been just a bit of scarring at some stage. But the oncologist actually held off any further treatment other than the orchidectomy. The type of cancer that it was would have required 6 months of chemo, whereas the seminoma would have only had like a day. I think it was a day sort of radio or chemo type treatment, but because it was a mixed cell, they have to do
be
a
more
whole
widespread.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was in university, somebody that I was studying with got diagnosed with testicular cancer in a very similar way to you in his early 20s. And yeah, I had just noticed that his balls were different and put it off and just thought it's too embarrassing to pull your pants down for your doctor and say, look at my balls, something's wrong. And in his case, his was quite progressed. It reached all other parts of his body, which thankfully he recovered from. But they did offer to freeze his sperm at that time, even though he was, in his early 20s, he wasn't with anyone, he wasn't contemplating fertility, but he wanted the option and he took it. So it's interesting because that would have only been a couple of years potentially after your diagnosis. So it's interesting how it's probably changed even now. Maybe it's more routine, kind of like how egg freezing is done for women who get diagnosed with cancers as well.
I think it is an important thing, and it's been part of our message. It's like, come on, guys, like you go and get your coughs and colds looked at. Go and just get your bits looked at. Just get your bloods done, and have your semen analysis. A lot of guys think the semen analysis is the only test. No, there's just it's a part of the test, and there's so much information that can come from that. And then you go down the rabbit hole of then you can actually look at, oh yeah, I'm fertile. Well then, okay, then I need to consider the partner that I'm with and whether they want children and how. Anyway, just
there's so much to it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You want to go down rabbit hole. entirely.
We love a rabbit hole. So did you and Laura ever try to conceive unassisted, or you knew straight away that you'd be at the fertility
I think
specialist?
that was one of the bonuses of the cancer, is basically it sort of thrust us into IVF because there was zero sperm in my ejaculate, and because of the cancer and the treatments, other than, like, we did the fine needle, but that was a blind procedure. And it was if you look at it, how lucky it was just to find that one sperm, because you're basically just sticking a needle in a haystack and you get one sperm, and that was what kept us going. If we hadn't have got that sperm, then potentially, even if you have a look in our book, like we talk about fertility mindsets, we would have had to move our mindset from the IVF to, okay, we're going to have to look at donor, and we're going to have to, and then I have to change my mindset that, okay, I have to be okay with this and how this is going to work. So, yeah, a lot changed for us with that one little broken sperm, which they flushed down the toilet. Well, I don't know.
I'm sure they did.
I don't know. They didn't freeze it anyway.
They just reported it. So was Laura's fertility assessed before you both dove into the process of IVF, or were they just like, well, it's all Jon, so we're just going to jump right into IVF?
I think one of the things, because we knew it was me, and Laura being Laura, we did the full workup, full warranty check as well, and everything seemed to be good, okay. But she just doesn't respond well to the medications. If we go all the way back to our first cycle, and that was with another doctor, and in essence, it ended up being a doctor that just couldn't handle our case, or wouldn't have been able to handle our case. If we hadn't have fired him, we wouldn't be where we are. Infertility Man, it wouldn't have occurred. None of this would have occurred. We wouldn't have met the doctors that we've met. So it's not who you hire, it's who you fire. So we did that very quickly, and we were lucky enough to find two of the most amazing doctors, not only in Melbourne, but the world. And they've just been with us all the way. That was a big one, is when we actually moved from that doctor, and that actually sent us on the road for Laura's fertility as well, because then we had to find someone who was actually going to be able to work with her and the issues with regards to medications. And then there's not only me, we're trying to time things, and it's so like playing God. It's just, it can be a bit frustrating sometimes, because you're in charge of your own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might have gone off track there a little bit, but it's just, we're just in this, we've been in here for so long. And
I know.
Please bring me back to center if you need me to, if I go off on too far off tack.
That's all right. I can only imagine with the journey that you've had that it's easy to do. There's so much that has happened over the years. So I can only imagine. So in terms of the IVF process, you mentioned that Laura went through 15 egg collections, and that was a combination of her being poor responder to the medications in terms of not stimulating too well. And then you also had that first micro-tessie procedure where they found the one not great sperm, but it was a sperm.
So that was actually a fine needle aspiration where they found the one.
Oh, okay.
So the first time, and this actually changed our tack with regards to the plan. You've got to think on your feet in IVF, and I think that's what we did. We went, right, for Laura, even though she doesn't respond well to the medications, we need 20-ish eggs minimum. If I'm going to do the procedure, the micro-tessie, and we find 20 sperm, 30 sperm, good sperm, then we can put them together, and then hopefully we make a couple of embryos. But it was pointless for us to get 3 eggs and then me to do a procedure where potentially we mightn't find anything. But if we did, what a waste of the sperm that we had.
The limiting resource is the sperm, not the egg.
Hold there.
So it was really about banking as many eggs as possible, because the sperm was the limited kind of resource. So it was a more limited resource.
Right. That's exactly right. And the reason why we did it, we actually spoke to both our doctors, and we were freezing eggs, and obviously COVID happened, which was sort of a bit out of the blue. And I ended up getting the last procedure before the initial shutdown.
Wow.
So I basically ended up calling because I wasn't due for about another 3 months, I think, my appointment. I ended up calling and I said, mate, I'm ready to go if you want. And I basically just got the call and ended up doing the first procedure because I think we had about 31 eggs. We didn't realise at that stage how brutal the numbers can be. We did the procedure. They found some sperm. They found 31 eggs. He basically went in and was able to find enough sperm straight away. They put them together, and look, we ended up with like one embryo and like two maybes that we froze, which is really hard when you've got 31 at start, and then by the end of day 5, you're literally, we kind of weren't ready for that, the attrition rate. Although you hear people, and we get to speak with a lot of people where they just, oh yeah, we've got 10 or so going, and then they got none. It's just,
Yeah.
it's hectic. It's tough.
It
But
is.
yes,
It
you
is
are right.
truly one of those big false sense of security situations with how it works with IVF. There are just zero guarantees, and you've almost got to expect the worst, hope for the best, rather than expect the best, hope for, like, in reverse kind of thing. Because, yeah, I think especially those initial numbers, it's all a numbers game, and it feels like you're dictated by these numbers, especially in that time frame, and it's quite intense. And I think it can really, I think it can crush you any way you spin it. But I think it can be really hard if you, get some what appears to be quote unquote good results up front, and then the attrition rate can just be so high, like you
Yeah,
said.
you do.
Yeah.
You never really see anyone jumping online and going, "Hey guys, I'm really grateful I got 3 eggs." And then you never really know everyone's story as well. But yeah, the reason why we did it, and you were correct, we just had to bank some eggs, just in the hope that if we found more sperm than we needed, then we were able to potentially make some embryos. So that sort of led us into the when we were able to do it a second time, we were able to basically set 6 months ahead, and we spoke to our doctors, right, let's do something different now. Instead of frozen eggs and fresh sperm, let's see if we can do frozen eggs, and fresh sperm. So we ended up, which actually worked better for us, and they tied to, it ended up being a medicated cycle, that last one, where Laura was able to tie in on the same day. She did a retrieval and I did my second procedure. The doc did ask, do you want to do it again? And I said, no, I do not want to do it again. And he basically went to town, and we ended up with a couple of straws of sperm, but it's pretty broken stuff. Like they're pretty much rummaging through the worst of the worst type thing. But yeah, that's brought us to here, basically.
Yeah. And so take us perhaps a little bit behind the scenes of some of the emotions, thoughts. I know we just touched on it just briefly about, you two going through what is a grueling marathon of fertility treatments on both sides of the fence. And how did you survive as a couple? Because IVF can really, we know it erodes at many relationships, not just marriages and romantic relationships, but even your social relationships and friends and family and work and all sorts of things. So we'd just love to, if you would like to share a little bit more of
Yeah,
your
yeah,
perspective
I
on
appreciate
that
the
side.
question. It's a great question because Laura and I think what we've been through, and there's people been through worse than us. We couldn't have done it without us being on the same page, for one. There's been a lot of understanding on either side. We've had to give a lot of ground and then take a lot of ground as well. But I think the biggest thing is about open communication. When you get into this, like, there's literally nothing you need to hide from each other. You are going to find that you are literally your only support, because the world just doesn't understand unless they are in the world of infertility. And when I say they don't understand, it's not through any bad intention on their part. It's
No,
just that they want to make it all right for you. But I think what that does then is it actually minimizes. They're trying to minimize what's happening to you. And being an IVF, you on edge all the time. You know every part of this equation. You are playing a part in every stage of this process. You're waiting on results. You're waiting on other people. The uncertainty is rife. You have to really, one of your basic human needs is variety, and I tell you, you have to thrive in that environment because the uncertainty is off the charts, which can lead to a lot of mental health issues, coping strategies with regards to anxiety and nervousness and stress, and being able to work together on this is really important. Laura and she knows that I do my bits, which is like I write in a journal. I just have some quiet time away. I do a few exercises, just getting back into my body or whatever. And she knows that something that she needs me to do so that I can be 100% there for her when she needs. And the burden of treatment lies with Laura. I just am in awe of what she's achieved and what she continues to achieve. But it does hurt for me watching that because I feel like I just want to pick her up and carry her the rest of the way. And I try and do, or I just do it for her, but that's not possible. I think one of the biggest lessons is when your friends could learn from this is that minimizing what is happening to someone just doesn't work. Oh, it can't be that bad. Oh, I know so and so had this as well. But to that person, to us, like it is literally the worst thing that is happening to us. And sometimes it's really hard to get out from behind that cloud and peek past. For us, we have our baby making meetups because Laura can talk about this stuff from morning until night and then from night until morning. I tell you, it was incessant. And for me, it was just rising my anxiety. And I guess she probably felt that I probably got a bit more detached as well. This is right at the beginning of the journey. And it wasn't until we talked to her, I said, man, I can't talk about this right now. Like, I need to. And we ended up just creating these things called this baby making meetups, where we created a notes page where we just dropped questions in, and then we said, "Hey, Friday night, let's make a feed and have a sit down and have a chat through all our list of things." And I went, "Oh, that works for me. I can do that." Just like you use a calendar and you book in appointments, let's book in an appointment. Let's do a fertility appointment. Let's do a baby making meetup, and let's just talk about all things that we're doing, we need to do, appointments we need to go to, what you need from me for this. And then once we're done with that, we can put a pin in it. Then we can actually do some other stuff or focus on some other stuff. So that was
reduce that preoccupation invading all those other elements of your life. It won't eliminate it completely because it can't, but you're kind of delegating enough time to have a conversation and know that you're both going to be present and have that conversation. And yeah, it's kind of like, I listen to lots of finance podcasts, but they always say that about like finance stuff. Like nobody wants to constantly be talking about a budget or the bills or whatever. But if you just make an appointment once a month or once a quarter or whatever you need, and then, delegate all those conversations to then it's just that one uncomfortable conversation instead of lots of small ones all the time.
That's right. And I think that was one of the bigger ones. And the other one was just being specific about who you put into your baby making team. In saying the baby making team, it's like who you need to support you. Obviously, I'm in Laura's and Laura's in mine, but you can't actually rely on your family and friends sometimes. You'll be really surprised at who actually shows up for you at times when you need it the most. And yeah, it's been quite interesting, some of the people we've ended up connecting with, and you just really feel their heart. And you're like, wow, that was really interesting. I just didn't expect that. But being specific and actually being conscious in your decisions around those people that are going to offer that safety net or just that buffer or just even that shoulder to cry on when you need to, without any advice, without any judgment. They're few and far between. And again, it comes back to that. That's not through bad intention. The intentions are honourable. They don't want you to be going through as much pain as what you are. But without being in the trenches with you, they literally cannot understand. And
Yeah. It's unfathomable.
yes,
I can
yes,
never
yes.
say that word good, but you know what I mean. It's the perfect word for what you're saying, but I just can't pronounce it good.
So yeah, I think those are a couple of big ones. The baby making meetups, being very specific about the team that you surround yourself with. Potentially the discussions around the fertility mindsets. If you have a look in the Man's Guide to Infertility, there's 7 mindsets, and they range from just conceiving naturally all the way through to, let's say, adoption. But to give an example, I had people talking to me about adoption when I'd literally only just come to terms with the idea of fertility mindset number 2, which is having assistance through IVF. And you
Yeah.
literally cannot comprehend. Someone's going to adoption. I'm like, hang on, like I'm here, and you're talking about here. So even if you look at couples and they're having a chat and they're not connecting, you potentially could go, oh, maybe the guy still thinks he can conceive naturally, and she's already moved on to
Action mode.
mindset 2 or 3, which is actually having help or fostering or donors and unless you're on the same mindset, you actually can't have a conversation about where you're going to take this moving forward. And if you could actually pull it apart and go, oh, this is where we are actually breaking down in our communication. So then the question comes back to how do we bridge this gap? And potentially, I hate to say it, maybe the gap is not able to be bridged, which obviously means, right, do you cut and run? Yeah. Anyway, some tough decisions need to be made. Though, if the outcome is a family and this isn't the partner to get that family, then why would you hang on to this partner? Yeah, they're just anyway. It just again, there's another rabbit hole. It depends on how deep you want to go. A lot of people are sitting surface, and there's some really difficult questions that need to have answers.
Yeah, I really like that mindset kind of staged approach that you just mentioned, because often as a fertility dietitian, I'm hearing, clients that are coming to me perhaps after a fertility specialist appointment where the word donor has been mentioned, of a donor egg or a donor embryo or a donor sperm or whatever. And they feel shocked and offended that the doctor would suggest such a thing. And I can see their perspective. You say it beautifully in the sense that they're just not in that mindset yet. They don't think that that's what is required yet to build the family that they've dreamed of, or this isn't the way that they thought it would happen. They haven't reconciled potentially that at all. So it comes as a big shock. And so they take it as, somebody losing faith in their body's ability to do this job.
That's right.
And
There's a bit of a personal insult.
It
It's a bit
does.
of a
It feels
personal
so
insult.
personal. And yeah, I'm often having to be that sounding board for people. Not that I guide them either which way, but I always just say, look, at the end of the day, you're paying a doctor to give their professional opinion to give you the best chance of getting a baby. Whether that is genetically linked to you or not, that's the part that they might consider now, is maybe something that they may need to consider. But if you're not there yet, you're not there yet, and that's okay too. We've got a whole podcast episode coming out about donor conception soon, so
A lot of men have trouble with this, Stephanie. A lot of men have trouble with this part of it because a lot of this fertility is attached to the masculinity. And if you can actually remove these and the ego attached to it, you would actually look at the outcome at hand, which is, do you want a family? How do I make that happen? And I know it's hard. Like, I haven't had to use the donor or go down the road, but I tell you, we had to, in the background, you're sort of preparing for that, because going into the first micro test, I had just as much chance to find out that there was no sperm in there, and I would have had to move on to mindset, the next mindset, and start, right, how is this going to happen? So it's a minefield. But for men, again, it comes back to getting checked early, taking a good look at your intention, and being open and upfront with your partner as well, because I feel a lot of men these days are sort of potentially wasting a lot of fertile years for women because they don't understand what is happening with their eggs, basically. with a
Oh,
woman's
yeah.
cycle and eggs.
I can say
We'll
that
wait 5 years.
firsthand.
Yeah. We'll wait 5 years. And you're like, oh, like 5 years. Like, all right. So what happens? We end up in the same place in 5 years, and then you make the choice and you go, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that is such a huge issue. And I was dating a lot in the last couple of years, just obviously because of my job. It comes up in conversation a lot early in the piece. And just the lack of general awareness in terms of age-related fertility decline in women, the lack of awareness of even just like what I would think is basics of IVF. Like somebody asked, do you have to be sliced open like a laparoscopy to retrieve eggs? And like, it's not to make light of it. It's just the public who don't have any contact with fertility treatments or don't know anyone do not understand the basic logistics of it. Not even the emotions or the struggle. Leave all that even to a side for a second, which is a lot of the picture, but they just don't understand the medical fact element of it at all. And I think that is problematic because it is affecting the whole society. And like I always used to joke about when I used to go on some of these dates, I was like, well, I mean, you could wait another 5, 10 years and then you could date someone who's 10, 15 years younger than you and you might be fine. But where does that leave women? It's a tricky scenario. But I mean, that's a whole separate social
You're never
kind
going
of
to
issue
be. You're
conversation.
never going to find anyone more interested or more into your journey as you.
Oh,
And if
absolutely.
you putting your expectations in other people to acknowledge your efforts and your input and your experience, you're just setting yourself up for pain because everyone has their own challenges in their life and they are focused on their own life. And really, in essence, people don't have time for others because they're
Mm.
dealing with their own stuff. So if you can come to terms with the idea that you go, right, your journey's tough. Yes, it is. That's great. Now, what's next? Who's part of your team? How can you get the support that you need? How can you fill the gap between having this family and where you're at right now? Consolidate, fortify, go to the dietologist, get it, like do all the stuff that you
Yeah.
can. Like in the background, Laura and I, we removed plastics. We changed our body sprays. We started making them. The essential oils we used. We got rid of soaps. We got rid of we
All
use
the
soap.
things.
We use soap, by the way.
Clean.
We just started making our own, our washing powders, alcohol. Even for the time in the lead up to the microtest, we removed coffee, and even now I only have one coffee. We went plant. Well, Laura was already plant based. I was sort of on the road there. She didn't cause me to go. It was just one of those decisions I made around that time. It's a bit of coincidence. I went plant-based. We wash all our food. We source the good food. We took all the supplements we needed, a lot of antioxidant. We led an alkaline rich diet, reduced acid-producing foods. It was
Yeah,
a lot.
it's a lot. It's a big burden. I think something you mentioned earlier that I just want to touch on before we round out is that men particularly associate their fertility with masculinity, and that therefore, if their fertility is compromised, I see a lot of sense of shame or about talking about it or even just internalizing that shame quite a lot with regards to male fertility. What was your experience of that? Or like any, I guess, words of wisdom to potentially men or, people's partners who are tuning in who are navigating this?
It is a great question because I think, again, that comes back to your expectations. If you don't expect anything out of anyone, you cannot be disappointed, which is the basics of it all. So you cannot expect your mates to understand because potentially they haven't had the issue, or potentially they're sticking their head in the sand like the millions of other blokes out there who are thinking they'll be fine. She'll be right, mate, until it's not. Attaching to masculinity for me, I don't think that, hence why we're here. We shared our journey. Laura, I remember Laura asking me at the beginning of our journey when we decided to share, she said, well, it's going to be you've got to make yourself quite vulnerable and put yourself out there. And I just said, look, I don't care. This is important stuff. And I guess for me, like, I've talked about everything. Everyone knows about my one nut and bloody gynecomastia. I don't know, like, it doesn't matter. To me, it's just information. I never attached it to my masculinity. I don't think I ever let it attack my attitude. It's not toxic positivity. I think I have a lot of faith in the fact that of what I can bring and how I can use these challenges that I've experienced. And when it comes back to a guy just getting out and going, you know what, if you're an action man, why don't you just get up, go to your doctor, have a chat to someone, get your bloods done, have a physical, get your semen analysis done, and then at least you've had a warranty check and you go, you've got the basics. Now, who knows what's going to happen in the future? God forbid you get testicular cancer. God forbid something else happens. God forbid your partner gets sick. So much technology available now. There's freezing eggs. We can really look after our future and find that person that's going to help us out. But the thing is, we've got to do our part, and our head in the sand is not doing our part. It's funny, I had this conversation with a guy recently just about, oh, no, I've never got anyone pregnant. And I said, isn't that interesting? I just haven't. And I went, isn't that interesting? You know what I mean? Like, if you were going to delve down the road, that's really fascinating. I haven't been great with protection and no one's got pregnant. Maybe it's me. You know what I mean? But you don't. But a lot of people actually don't make that connection, and they go, "Oh no, she'll be right. We'll push that one aside because it could potentially be something." But imagine if it is just let's say, varicocele or something that can be just removed by a minor procedure, and then the production comes back, and you go, "Oh, but after years of that, anyway." It's just about
Yeah.
taking the next step and getting it done. And I know you've got some stuff to do right now. I know you've got appointments. And again, you started down this rabbit hole.
And I'm grateful to have you on this rabbit hole. Tell us about your book and your Instagram and YouTube platform, which we'll all link in the show notes. But just tell us briefly about your book and who the book is for. So people...
I am the unflattering name Infertility Man on Instagram and Facebook, and the YouTube channel is Jon and Laura, Jon and Laura. We shared our journey. We wrote a book, and basically because I found the resources available, they weren't helpful for me. So we thought, well, why don't we just see if we can create something? The Man's Guide to Infertility, it's for both men and women. It's for whoever's going into infertility and for anyone who knows anyone in infertility. You'll be able to understand the processes. We've used our stories. We've interviewed 38 plus men, and we've got doctors involved as well, and our doctors involved as well, and they offer great insight into the workings of the whole process. And we made it a book that you could just jump in and jump out. It's not something you'll read from front to back. You can if you want. Let us know how you go. But it's one of those, you have a baby-making meetup. We've got examples of questions to set you through a baby-making meetup. You can actually, it's basically just not a how-to guide, but maybe a conversation starter, let's say, between you and your partner, between you and your family, between you and your friends, between someone else. And it literally is to put words in your mouth when it comes to having these challenging conversations. And it was a long process. Our fertility journey, we thought it was going to be 6 months. It's still in the process, 6 years on. And the book, we thought it was going to be written in 6 months. It's literally
6 years on. No,
it literally was something, we just weren't happy with what we were producing, but now we've created something. We really believe it can offer something to whoever's coming in or going out or experiencing it. The men's infertility group is on Facebook, and that's just growing as well. We just got a new member from Brazil, and I tell you what, getting those guys to share a story is like pulling blood from a stone. But anyway, it is great. It is great to see them light up when they do. So yeah, that's fantastic. But I really appreciate you having me today.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
been
you
an
for
honour.
joining us and sharing your story and Laura's story. And I really appreciate you, opening up. I know that's what you do already, but no, I'm very grateful. And I'm sure our listeners will take something from this episode. I really love that baby making meetup idea and your baby making team. And yeah, I really love that. That was my takeaway. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Jon. I hope you found this episode and insight into the male side of the fertility picture interesting. There was a lot of valuable chats in there, and I think some really important insights into getting your health checked, being vulnerable, and having open communication about your fertility story with your partner regularly. They were my key takeaways, so hopefully you got some key takeaways from Jon as well. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is the biggest gift to us to continue to provide this free resource to you all. And share it. Share it with somebody that may like to listen. Share it with your partner. Share it with a friend. I'm actively trying to make this more of a conversation more broadly for men who are not currently contemplating conception and start engaging with this fertility story more meaningfully from a much earlier point. So do me a favor, share it with a guy that you know needs to hear this message. And don't forget, of course, you can download our free preconception lifestyle checklist. There is an awesome setting yourself up for success page all for men in there as well, how to support that sperm health. So that's available for you to download right now. Over 5,000 future parents have got their hands on it already. So it is one of the most popular downloads we have. So definitely go and check it out and get yours. The link is in the show notes. I'll catch you in the next episode, everyone. Fertility Friendly Food, the podcast, acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises the continuing connections to lands, waters and community. We pay our respects to First Nation cultures and to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people tuning in today. This podcast is recorded on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.